Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler, and we will be also joined by Ray Flores of ESPN 1000 in Chicago for this week's all-new episode where we have a lot to go over inside of headlines. And as you can guys see behind me, I have the brand spanking new UFC 181 event poster as done by DC comic book artist. And that's the event poster for this weekend, and we'll be picking the main cards for the event, UFC 181, which features 2 title fights for the UFC. So super excited about that. I had to run out and buy that poster. So don't expect that to be a thing. I'm not going to have the event poster for every event that we're covering now. I don't have that much money and or space on my wall. But this one was cool, so I decided to get it. And anyways, Juice, how's it going, my friend?
Doing good, doing good. Headed back to work today, which is, I guess that's great. Hey, Topps UFC Bloodlines 2014 comes out on Friday. So definitely, exciting. Always a chance to open up some packs of cards and get a few things. But yeah, check out our guys at A&N Sports Cards. Nick over there. He's going to have some cheaper weight class breaks. It's a lot easier. We've talked about it before. It's a lot easier to get in at a regular price point than paying hundreds of dollars for your own box. So, yeah, hopefully I can get into a couple of those on Friday and fights on Saturday. Jim's going to Vegas the week after. Since I think since we've talked last, Sting came back in the WWE. All is well in the world. I got to eat Thanksgiving dinner like 4 times. Well, been a whirlwind week, my friend.
All right, well, let's introduce Ray Flores, as I said, of ESPN 1000 Chicago. You can follow him on Twitter at RayFlores86. And Ray, thanks for coming back on Beyond the Cage.
Jim, the Juice, man, oh man, a special holiday gift because I get to join you gentlemen on a week where there is tons of news, guys. Continued success in Beyond the Cage. Love listening every single week.
Well, thanks for coming back on, Ray. And, of course, not just 181, the huge event to talk about. We're going to have some huge headlines to talk about as well, and that's where we're going to start the program. First, we'll go with The Ultimate Fighter 20, Episode 10, happened the second fight in the quarterfinal round as the 5 and 4 seed squared off against each other, as it was Aisling Daly and Jessica Penne, both of Team Pettis, both formerly of Invicta. The 4th seed was Penne. The 5th seed was Daly. I had a feeling this was going to be a very close fight. It was going to be a hard fight to pick, and that's the way it went down, a 3-round fight between both ladies. And this was just a tough fight. They really mentioned that Daly had an awkward style, and I guess for some reason I didn't pick up on it as much in her first fight against Magana, but in this fight against Penne, I really noticed it. I mean, she switched stances within a couple seconds of each other, whether going southpaw or right-handed orthodox. I mean, she switched that up constantly throughout the fight and seemed effective striking from either angle, and I think that's really what threw Penne off early in this fight. And I think once she realized that I'm not sure if I can kind of counter that striking as well, or I'm going to get hit, I got to try to get this thing to the ground and see if I can kind of get her that way. And you saw at the end of the second round, Jessica Penne used her jiu-jitsu skills, take this fight to the ground to end the second round, which probably won her that round, forced the third round. And then the third round, she went right back to that ground game and completely dominated Daly, who maybe was a little gassed, maybe not as prepared for that type of attack from Penne as maybe she should have been, and she ended up losing. So Jessica Penne, the former Invicta Atomweight champion, she wins the fight over Daly and moves into the semi-final round, and she will face the winner of Tisha Torres and Carla Esparza, which we will find out this Wednesday. And, of course, Randa Marcos is already qualified for the semifinal round. She will take on the winner of JoJo Calderwood and Rose Namajunas also this Wednesday, as we're going to see 2 fights this Wednesday. But, Dave, your thoughts on the Daly-Penne fight first?
Yeah, I thought the fight was good. I think Daly, it goes to show a little bit. Remember, she trains full-time with Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor doesn't have a real orthodox, he's a little tricky too. he likes to move around, jump around, hands up, hands down, legs backwards, forwards, all that kind of weird stuff. So I don't know if it's something that's coached or, if it's a personality trait with those two, but it's awkward and it works. Every time Brian fights in the cage, Ebersol, you always hear Rogan say, this he's very relaxed and he's very weird. It's hard to get a grip on what he's doing. I don't think any up-and-coming fighter can look at Daly, McGregor, Ebersol, guys that are weird like that. I don't think they can look at people like that and mold their game after. It just works for certain people. It works for Daly. Even though she lost to Penne in this fight, I still think she's a force to be reckoned with. I still think she's top 5 in that division. And, Jessica Penne's top 5 in the division for a reason as well. And, she moves on in a hard-fought victory. And, I think Penne's obviously she's one of the front runners to win the belt.
Now, Ray, looking at the show, of course, Jessica Penne and Randa Marcos already in the semifinals. Do you like either of those two to get to the finals? Either propose, like I said, Namajunas or Calderwood. Of course, we have Torres and Esparza coming up. Or do you think one of the two winners tonight will likely advance to the semifinals?
You know what, Jim? I like Joanne Calderwood without question. I really am extremely high on her. I think she has a huge ceiling. Also, Jessica Penne, just based on the fact that she knows what it is to be a world champion with Invicta. And Dave, we have seen it. Jim, you have seen it on Fight Pass. The level of opposition within Invicta is massive. It is such a high level, and when you are the champion, you are a marked woman, and you understand what it is to be at the top of the heap. For Penne, it's not something so far off to kind of climb the ranks and know what it is to be at the top. And I think Invicta is proving that they are such a terrific organization for women to display their talent, and it is the best women fighters from around the world. Granted, the UFC now has taken 35 and 15, but still, I think that when you are a champion within Invicta, I think it makes it a little bit easier to transition into the UFC ranks and kind of make your way up the ladder to claim their title.
Now, Ray, of course, as you said, you like Calderwood, so you like Calderwood versus Marcos for one semifinal, and you think Penne Esparza, like a rematch or not a rematch, a match of two former Invicta champions, or do you think Torres moves on against Penne?
You know what? I like Tisha Torres a lot, but I don't think that that's going to happen. So I like Carlos. I think Carlos Esparza is a more well-rounded fighter. I think Tisha,
It sounds way cooler when Ray says Carla Esparza, because I can't roll the R as well as him.
No, but I honestly and I appreciate it. Just the checks in the mail. I think with Tisha Torres, I think she's a little wet behind the ears. I think she still is green in many aspects in terms of how to handle being a prize fighter. Carla Esparza is so calm, cool, collected. Her demeanor is just at a different level, and I saw that in Kansas City. We've seen it in her fights in the past with Invicta. So I definitely like Penne and Carla Esparza.
Yeah, and I think so too. And kind of my case for that was if Randa Marcos can take down Tisha Torres, I gotta believe Carla Esparza can.
No doubt about it. I mean, Carla Esparza is not going to be denied. And Tisha Torres, I love her athleticism, but she hasn't been able to translate that totally to takedown defense. I mean, listen, I know people are trying to modify themselves from Conor McGregor. Tisha Torres is not the female version of Conor McGregor, and she proved that against Marcos.
Yep.
All right, well, let's get on. Speaking of Invicta, Invicta has an event this weekend. Unfortunately, Ray, you're not announcing it, I believe. Is Joe Martinez back?
Joe is back, and
Okay.
Joe's one of the best in the business, so I'd love to be down in Houston, but this is Joe's baby and stuff, and I'm sure he'll tear it up down in Houston with Marwanello.
All Are you a little like jealous because you just got to go to Davenport, Iowa for the last event, and he gets to go down to Houston, like a
Yeah,
big city, a lot of stuff to do. Like you're kind of like, man, why couldn't like you go to Davenport and I can get to go to Houston?
yeah. You know what though, Jim? I'll be honest, man. And Dave, Dave was there. There's a lot of fun. You find. I had an opportunity to have great conversations with the head of the Iowa Athletic Commission, Joe Walsh, along with the Godfather of MMA, manager extraordinaire Monty Cox. The fans, those that came out were terrific. Houston is a fun place, but I mean, Davenport, Iowa was nice, and I think the 35-minute flight wasn't too bad either.
All right. Well, speaking of Houston, before we get to event, obviously the second Invicta event, not in Kansas City. The last one, obviously, in Iowa. This one in Houston. Do you think it will be well attended? Do you think it will, the fans in Houston will embrace this event, or do you think it kind of will get maybe lost in the shuffle there in a new market, which maybe is not as MMA friendly as some other markets they could have gone to for this event?
Well, the UFC has been in Houston. Legacy FC has been in Houston before. So MMA has been there, but I don't know how many women's fights have been there in Houston. And I don't know the undercard of Invicta 10 if there's a boatload of Texas talent on there. That was the one gripe that I had in Davenport, is Davenport's not a huge fight town, but you can't bring a card where the main event is from Davenport and that's it. If they would have had a couple of, Iowa, Illinois pros that they could sprinkle on there, I think it would have been a little better attended, and the live crowd atmosphere would have been a little bit better. So some of these people on the undercard, I'm not exactly sure who they are, and if they're from that area, but I think that could help Invicta in a big way.
I
think so too.
Oh, go ahead, Ray.
No, I mean, Jim, just in terms of what they're doing, I like that Invicta is going outside of their, territory, so to speak, when it comes to Kansas City, and they're expanding it. I mean, guys, let's look at independent MMA, and Invicta is a national company. And if you look at, like, a Legacy will just go to, like, New Mexico. They very rarely are they going to go to, like, Minnesota. Titan tried to do that, and now they're, finding difficulties financially, from what I hear. So Invicta's a national company. This isn't the wrestling business back in the day where you're territories. Invicta is a national company, and they want to prove that, yeah, we'll go to Davenport, Iowa. We'll go to Houston, Texas. And even though we may not draw well right now, we're building up an audience. So I like that they are taking this chance to expand their brand to different parts of the country.
Well, I would say for this event, kind of like what they did with Barb Honchak, kind of putting her in her hometown. Again, they kind of delayed the announcement, but I think it would have been cool if they would have been able to do this in Watterson's, neck of the woods there in Albuquerque. And I think you would have had a built-in audience right there, just because of the, Albuquerque did very well in attendance for their fight night. How many, fighters train now with Jackson's there? It's kind of become, sort of a breeding ground for talent, and where a lot of people go to train MMA now. So I think that might have been a good place to start for this event. But we'll see how Houston does for them, and it could open up a new market, like you said, Dave, potentially for a company that, again, is a national company. But I do want to add, and we'll get to her fight, but Andrea KGB Lee, she's technically not from Texas, but she's from Shreveport, Louisiana, which is not too far from Houston. So I got to imagine, out of all the fighters on this card, she'll probably have a lot of friends and family in attendance for this one.
Yeah, and Ray can attest to it. We've been to New Year's Eve shows where 15 people show up, because that was a terrible time to put a show on. But then, we've gone to, the UIC Pavilion and the Outdoor War and all these different shows in the area where there's lots and lots of people there. If the crowd is into it, regardless of how good the fights are, it makes the product seem somehow better. Me and Ray were just at a show 2 weeks ago, Total Fight Challenge, run by Joe Goitia, 20th anniversary. This girl sold the entire place out. This one young lady sold the entire place out. A minute and 30 seconds later, she's tapping out to a triangle. Everybody in the place was still cheering and having a great time. And it was, I'm using air quotes here, it was just an amateur show, which, I mean, these are people that are trying to see what they want to do with their careers, right? But it had a, maybe I'm off base here, but it was louder and a better atmosphere than Invicta was in Iowa until we got to that main event, just because of the way the crowd was acting.
Dave is correct. I would agree with Dave 1,000%. What's sad is that the level of fights inside the cage is ridiculous. It's world class when it comes to Invicta, but the crowd needs to get into it, and I do think that in a place like Houston is built for, big events and sporting events, whether it be, I have done boxing shows in Houston or outside of Houston in Humble, Texas, and we've seen the UFC go there, WWE goes there. They have the Texans and the Rockets, and I won't even mention the Astros, but they're there. So I think when it comes to an event like this, I think they're doing the Illusions Theater. They're doing a smaller theater. I think that's going to be a benefit to them. I love that Michelle Watterson's on the card. I think she is a superstar without question. And I think I hope they do well on Friday.
All right, well, let's get to the fights for Invicta 10, as we already mentioned, in Houston, Texas. Looking over some of the bigger names on the card, we got Peggy Morgan, former Ultimate Fighter contestant. She will be taking on Andrea Waro. We also have Charmaine Tweet coming back in action. She will be taking on Faith Van Duyn. Also, Jennifer Maya will take on undefeated Deanna Bennett. And then we already mentioned Andrea KGB Lee will make her second fight in Invicta. She is filling in for the injured Vanessa Porto, as she will be taking on the Happy Warrior Roxanne Modafferi. And I think before the injury to Porto, the winner of that fight was probably going to get a shot at Barb Hontrack. Now, with Lee in, I don't know if the same can be said. I think if Roxanne wins, I think she can still get that shot. If Lee wins, maybe not. It's definitely up in the air, but I think if she looks impressive in victory, she may get that shot against Honchak, but we'll see on that front. And then the co-main events of the evening, we have a longtime veteran of the sport, Tanya Evinger. She will take on Cindy Dandois, if I said that correctly. And, of course, the main event for the Atomweight title, Michelle Watterson against newcomer to Invicta, the Brazilian, Hirka Tiburcio. Probably CO, I would imagine. Ray can help on the pronunciations there. I'm sure he has his chart ready to go just in case they called him up from Chicago there to go down to Dallas just in case Joel got sick. He was already ready to go. But
love it, yes.
But looking over the fights, I was excited for Porto and Modafferi already, but KGB coming in, still excited. Still a great matchup, and glad they were able to salvage Roxanne on the card. I think wherever Roxanne goes, she seems to make it exciting. She's not the best stand-up fighter in the world. She's a really good jiu-jitsu player, but when she's on her feet, she's attacking. She isn't just simply stalling and waiting to get it to the ground. I think we've seen her try to develop her stand-up skills a lot more in these last couple of years than in the past when we saw her in say, like Strikeforce. So I think she's starting to develop those stand-up skills, but this is a matchup where I don't think she wants to stand up with KGB. This is a kickboxing champion, a very tall and slender girl here at 125, and I think Roxanne, she's made strides, but I wouldn't even tempt the waters here. I think KGB, if keeps it standing, she has a very real chance to knock Roxanne out. I think that's very real. But if Roxanne can get this fight to the ground, I have all the confidence in the world she can submit KGB Lee. I think it's who can keep the fight in their domain, and for Roxanne, she just can't be stupid and prideful and be like, I want to show off my stand-up and get into a striking match with KGB.
Go ahead.
You want to jump on that, right?
No, absolutely. Well, you know what? I hate to say this, and I love what Roxanne Modafferi brings to the table, and she's really been a pioneer.
Oh, Ray cut out there. All right, we'll get Ray will attempt to get back on here, but Dave, your thoughts on the Modafferi and Lee matchup?
I'm gonna kind of take what I think Ray was gonna say, and I think that KGB is when she comes out all crazy. You know, her trying to think of the right word to describe it, Jim. You know, she comes out very aggressively in her fights, and I think that if she's going to try to get an early finish, and if she can get that early finish, that ground game clearly of Modafferi isn't even going to have time to get. She's not even going to have time to get to work, and oh, here we go, Ray's back.
So, sorry about that, guys, but Jim, getting to your point, guys. Andrea Lee, what I saw at her last month, she's dangerous. I love Roxanne Modafferi being a pioneer in women's mixed martial arts, but Andrea Lee is a different level of striker. She's mean, she's athletic, she's long, she has a variety of strikes, uses elbows, uses her knees. If Modafferi does not go immediately, the fight should start. I don't even care if this is quote unquote bad. Fight should start, bell rings or horn sounds. She should put her knees on the ground immediately and try to get her on the ground, because if she stands and trades with Andrea Lee is going to knock her head off.
Those were the words I was trying to use, Jim. Dangerous. That was the word I was looking for.
Well, also there for the flyweight division, as we mentioned, Jennifer Maia taking on Deanna Bennett. Maia was very close to a title shot before Invicta kind of had their whole break with finding the TV deal and whatnot, as she lost to Leslie Smith, who of course went on to fight Barb Honchak for the Invicta flyweight title. Since then, she has won twice in other promotions. Now she's back at Invicta, taking on the undefeated Deanna Bennett. And I got to believe with the victory, she also kind of throws her hat into the title picture as well. And, she has definitely been a revelation since dropping down to bantamweight. And, Bennett has looked very impressive so far, undefeated, but Maia has fought some of the best girls in Invicta and has beaten some of them. So this should be a very tough test for Bennett. And like I said, this is another fight that kind of factors into maybe who takes on Barb next.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a point and I already forgot it. I'm a terrible person.
All right, well, let's go to Ray, and then we'll come back to Dave.
I'll tell you what, Jim, the fact that Bennett has stayed active, outside of Invicta, says that she just wants to continue to better her craft. Whereas, and not that fighters who fought Invicta kind of were on the sidelines, but it is important to just be out there and take fights. But I don't think, and Dave and I have had, hour-long conversations on this, I don't think that you should have wars and these bangers, these, all-out, just terrific, nonstop fights outside of the bigger stage if you can avoid it. So it's been, and I think she's going to do well Friday night.
All right, well, let's get to the main event. Michelle Waterson against Harika Turbiso. Boy, I'm going to have trouble with that one. Turbiso? Tiburcio? Tiburcio? Okay, I think I got it now. All right, it only took me a couple times. All right, well, she is making her Invicta debut. She's taking on the karate hottie Michelle Waterson. Looking at Tiburcio, 8-2 overall in her career. 6 of 8 victories have come by way of submission. She's just 22 years old. She is currently riding a 3-fight winning streak. I guess of her 2 losses, one of them was to one of the girls who was trying to challenge for the 115-pound title for Invicta, Claudia Gadella, and she lost a unanimous decision to her. So this is a very tough girl, very accomplished grappler. But one thing that probably will go against her, obviously she fought at a higher weight class now at 105, but she's only 4'11". So not a very good girl, and not to say Michelle Waterson's huge, but compared to 4'11", Michelle Waterson's going to look huge at her 5'3" height, so she's going to have 4 inches on her, and I'm sure a reach, not to mention the great stand-up striking that Waterson has. Turbiscio is going to have her work cut out for her in this main event, and even if it goes to the ground, I think Waterson has shown that she is really improved in her jiu-jitsu game. I mean, let's not forget, I believe during the time they fought, Penne was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt, and she submitted her with an armbar. So Waterson, I think, can hang on the ground if that's where this fight goes, but much like when we were talking about with Modafferi and Lee, Turbiscio is going to have to take this fight to the ground, because if it stays standing, she's going to get picked apart by the Karate Hottie.
Yeah, the Karate Hottie will definitely pick her apart. Maybe they should put KGB Lee and the Karate Hottie against each other and let these 2 other jiu-jitsu ladies go against each other.
I think Lee would destroy Waterson.
Okay. Well,
just because of size. On skill, Waterson has more skill, but
I'm trying to get my Julie Kedzie on. That's all.
What do you think about the matchup, Ray?
I like it, but I think Waterson's just a different level, and she is her striking, her ground game. I mean, she trains with the best in the world. And Jim, I'm glad you brought up the point about if this card were to take place in New Mexico, because I'm actually headed to New Mexico on Saturday to work with Invicta FC and Tomate as well, Jody Esquivel. There's such a demand for MMA out there, and I've been to Albuquerque. I think I've been to New Mexico this year about seven or 8 times. Twice for boxing, another 5 or 6 for MMA. And every time there is a show, it gets packed. And the fans are just rabid, and the gyms come out. There is such a high level, and there's so many good gyms down there. It's not just Jackson's. You have Latrell's MMA. You have a lot of up-and-coming gyms that are coming to the forefront. But getting back to your original point, Michelle Waterson is the goods. It is only a matter of time before she gets a little bored defending her title, and she's like, you know what, I can gain a couple more pounds. I'm going up to 115.
All right,
and then she'll be a Zuffa-owned commodity.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, well, let's get to the big granddaddy headline of this week. It came out yesterday, December 2nd, courtesy of Canton, Massachusetts. That's where this press release is coming out of, that the company known as Reebok will step into the octagon for 2015. As it says, global fitness brand and MMA giant UFC enter into a long-term partnership. That partnership will be 6 years, and I'm going to read over some of the press release here, not the whole thing, not the quotes or anything, but as it states, global fitness leader Reebok announced a groundbreaking partnership with the UFC, the world's leading mixed martial arts organization. Under the long-term deal, Reebok will become the exclusive, authentic global outfitter of the UFC, creating for the first time ever UFC Fight Week gear and a Fight Night kick for all UFC athletes. Reebok will also be the exclusive apparel provider for the millions of UFC fans around the world. In addition to benefiting UFC athletes and fans, the Reebok and UFC Alliance also has a significant charitable component. Starting in 2015, a percentage of sales from Reebok/UFC product will directly benefit Fight for Peace, an international NGO that uses boxing and martial arts, combined with education and personal development to realize the potential of young people in communities that suffer from crime and violence. Now, of course, as part of this uniform deal, one of the things is there is no longer going to be sponsorships on an individual fighter basis on their shirts and or hats or shorts, and also the fight banner, which also would display sponsorships, that will also be eliminated with more of a generic fighter-only type of deal. And this reduces sponsors, obviously for the fighters on an individual level, and pretty much the only sponsors that can sponsor UFC, I guess you could say, would be on like a national, international level. You know, getting paid spots on the ads, being the official drink of the UFC, the official candy of the UFC, that sort of thing. Obviously, placement on the octagon floor itself and the padding and whatnot. So sponsorships are going to be a lot more limited and probably going to be a lot more pricey. But looking at the actual deal itself, I was at first, when I heard the announcement, I was kind of against it when I just first glance. Now I've seen the press release, I've seen a couple articles kind of chronicling more of the nuance of the deal, but it doesn't seem all that bad. Not as bad, again, as I first thought. A lot of the money that the UFC is getting for this 6-year deal will be channeled back into the fighters, and they're going to kind of break it down kind of by pay. So obviously the higher you move up in the division and eventually become champion, you're going to get paid more per fight based on the Reebok deal. So that's how they're going to kind of do it. So not to say fighters didn't have an incentive already to be better, but now if it wasn't setting already, you know, the better you do, the more you will get, not only, you know, in your regular contract, but the more you will get as part of this Reebok deal, and it eliminates fighters having to scrounge for extra money through sponsors and whether or not they're going to be approved and all that thing. And hopefully this leads to fighters getting paid better, which has long been a topic of hot discussion. And to me, I guess the losers, or the people that are hurt the most in this, are the company that have been sponsoring these fighters, especially the clothing companies. You know, like say like Headrush, Tap Out, Affliction, companies like that have been sponsoring fighters, you know, making the walkout shirts and whatnot, and kind of promoting their brand that way. And I'll throw an example. How about Uriah Faber's company, Torque? You know, all those companies that were, you know, selling T-shirts because, you know, they were worn by UFC fighters. That now is all going to go out the window. And again, this deal will start July of next year. And that's really who this hurts, is the companies that sponsor a lot of these UFC fighters. It's not going to really hurt the UFC too much. And in fact, it probably even helps the UFC a little more. They're probably making about the same amount of money with this deal than they would maybe on a per fighter basis. But again, it's announced to happen. We'll see when it all goes down. But I'm leaning more towards it being a positive thing more so than a negative thing. But Ray, what were your thoughts on this announcement that happened yesterday?
Well, I think it's interesting the fact that fighters are going to get paid. I do like that, but the question is how much. And not only that, but okay, let's look at dollars and cents. If I'm corrected, didn't the UFC charge a sponsorship tax for $100,000 to sponsor fighters? Am I correct on that? This is before the Reebok deal.
Yes. The only thing is I wasn't sure if that's a one-time fee or if that's every time you then sponsor. You know, I wasn't sure how many times you had to pay that $100,000. That's the only thing I wasn't sure on. But regardless, you had to pay it at least once, right? I mean,
yeah, I would assume. So let's say, how many companies do you think paid that? Like 7 or 8?
There was probably
Maybe
a handful.
more?
And then you got somebody like we talked to AJ Hiller. He got grandfathered in because he had been sponsoring fighters so long that he didn't have to pay that $100,000. And
Okay,
he said if he did, he wouldn't have had to. So, but
new companies.
What you're saying, yeah, new companies, yeah, would have had to pay it.
Okay, so new companies. So the UFC's pretty much saying we don't want your $100,000. Last time I checked, guys, I think this is a report out of Forbes, and I'm not a UFC basher. I'm just looking at facts. Isn't the UFC down percentage-wise, profit-wise, 40%? Have you guys seen those numbers?
Yep.
Okay, they're down 40%. They're now, Dana said in an interview, I think, with Ariel, that the UFC is not going to make a dime on this. But the UFC is not a publicly traded company. So technically, they don't have to open up the books. Here's my thing. I love the fact that fighters are getting paid, but my only gripe on this is and he should really be thankful he's in the UFC now. Somebody like Conor McGregor, who had a large following in his home country of Ireland, who was widely popular with Cage Warriors and their world champion. You mean to tell me if you're a world champion with Cage Warriors or ONE FC and you're fighting top-level fighters and you're making a good amount of money fighting on international TV and you're drawing, tons of money on sponsorship-wise, and you come to the UFC and you're unranked. So you go from maybe making 15 to 20 grand a fight to now being unranked, and who knows how much you're making under the Reebok deal. I understand that they're trying to make it more like the general, like NFL, NBA, whatever. But, guys, this is combat sports. Whether it be boxing, kickboxing, MMA, it's an individual sport. To try to dress these guys up, and even though they're going to have different styles, but in a uniform policy, it's an individual sport. I mean, I'm glad fighters are getting paid, and that's the thing that is most intriguing to me, but I don't agree with this uniform policy because unless we're going to Team MMA and we're having 5-on-5, let's get Team Jackson against Team Alpha Male.
Old IFL days.
Or putting them all in the cage at one time, 5-on-5, a 10-man battle royale inside the octagon. What's the point of uniforms?
Well, okay. Stand by, because here we go. Okay, first of all, to Ray's point about if you're Conor McGoober in Ireland and you're the Cage Warriors champion, let's be honest. How many people in Davenport, Iowa are watching Cage Warriors? The percentage of people in the U.S. that are watching that are obviously smaller. I mean, me and you are watching it, Ray. Jim's watching it. The diehards are watching it. But when he comes over here, he's guaranteed sponsorship. How many companies in Ireland that support Conor McGregor can pay that $100,000? Not that many. At least when
True.
He comes over, he's getting paid. If you go back and look, myself and Doug Keast argued this for 2 hours yesterday. GSP started in the UFC and won his first fight. His win and everything, all of his money, was $3,500.
Wow.
When he won at UFC 167, he made $675,000, and he was sponsored by all those big-time sponsors, right? So he's making all that. He's doing commercials, all based on an opportunity that the UFC gave him. UFC said, here's $3,500. You win this fight, you're going to move forward and forward and forward. And what did GSP do? He won every fight. He just keeps winning, and he makes all that money. And that's essentially what they're doing now. When you come into the UFC, whether you're 1-0, 0-0, 47-0, you're unranked, you're going to get a specified dollar amount. And then as you win and you progress up the rankings, you're going to make more money. When you become the champion, you make what Dana called the lion's share of the money. All they're doing is giving you a chance. The other thing is, you don't have to sign with the UFC. Ray, you had a couple conversations with local pro fighters at the last show that you went to. If the UFC calls and says, "Hey, fighter A, we need you to fight in 2 weeks in Vegas on the finale card," you don't have to sign that contract. Nothing's going to change if you don't sign that. If people cave in and sign those contracts, with the numbers that they're getting for unranked fighters, until somebody steps up, which nobody's going to do, that's just the way the pay is going to be. When I say the pay, I mean the Reebok deal. The pay is a completely different argument for a completely different day. Does anybody want to refute that?
I'm gonna step in and then we'll go back to Ray here. I want to get on Ray's point. The actual uniform thing is probably what I have the biggest gripe with, and I agree with you, Ray. I want to compare it kind of to tennis. Now, tennis players don't have sponsors all over their shorts and shirt, but they're wearing the company that's sponsoring. For instance, Maria Sharapova wears the Nike shirt with the Nike shorts and the Nike hat because she's paid to wear that. That's like her uniform, but she's not forced to wear one company's uniform and a select couple of designs. Same thing with Roger Federer. He wears Nike. He has all the Nike shirt and shorts and stuff. Andy Roddick's Lacoste, so he wears the Lacoste shirt, the Lacoste hat, the Lacoste shorts, and the shoes, and all that stuff. So it's still an individual basis, but it's not sponsors plastered over. And I think that's one thing we're going to kind of lose is that individuality. Of fighters kind of coming out with their own shorts, whether they have a bunch of sponsors, whether they have no sponsors on it. That is something we're going to lose, I think, a little bit here with everyone just wearing Reebok. So that's maybe kind of an unfortunate side effect. But I also want to bring up, too, about pay. Just because a company cannot sponsor a fighter in the cage, on their banner, on their shorts, letting their walkout shirts, that does not mean that a sponsor or a fighter cannot still be sponsored by a company. They just simply can't display their logo inside the cage, which a lot of companies, as you mentioned, Ray, they can't pay that $100,000. But if they pay somebody, say, $5,000 and say, hey, tweet about us, put it on your official website, put it on your Facebook, take a selfie on Instagram with you wearing or using this product, or going to this website, or in the case of our friend AJ Hiller, signing stuff for MMA signatures. Fighters can still seek sponsorship, or like you said, GSP, Dave, he can still do commercials for NOS Energy. That has nothing to do with Reebok. These fighters can still get sponsorship money. It just can't be in the cage anymore. And so obviously that's going to affect some things in terms of the amount they're getting, but they can still get extra money. So it's not like they're completely out of the water and they can't get any sponsors anymore. This Reebok thing is just kind of make it less of a toll to get more sponsors. So let's say for this fight, we're going to be interviewing Alex White later today. Let's say Alex White, he said he needs 10, him and his manager Joe say, hey, we need 10 sponsors, to make sure we got comfortable money to travel and a little extra money to go ahead with your contract. Now that number maybe is reduced to half, or maybe 2 or 3 coming forward with the new uniform saying, hey, maybe we're going to get paid this with the uniform deal. We're going to get paid this for the fight. If we could get 1 or 2, sponsors at X price, we'll be golden. So again, fighters can still get sponsored, but again, it's just going to reduce the amount that they have to get or they need to get now. So I just think that sponsorship will change, and you got to be, if you're a company wanting to sponsor fighters, you just got to change the way you do it.
That's true, but here's the thing though, Jim, is that it's not just in the cage. It's fight week activities. Mm-hmm. It's public workouts. It's press conference stuff. I mean, how many times did we see a SI like, I could sell, if I'm a main card fighter, if I'm main event or co-main event fighter, I could sell sponsorship for the press conference. Like, hey, I'm going to be on worldwide, websites. Let me wear your hat for the press conference. Also, right. A fighter we know, Ricardo Lamas. I don't know anything about the specifics here, and I'm sure they're going to make good money with the Reebok deal. But I know of a Mexican restaurant around here in Chicago that was on Lamas's banner, and Lamas's banner was filled with like 10 or 11 different companies. Yep. And I doubt those companies spent $100,000. So I think the $100,000 tax was only for Fight Shorts apparel. You could put whoever you want on your banner, and when people are looking at, that's a big, it's not visibility for 15 minutes, but that's visibility for a good amount of time there that you're paying money to. So you could have 20 sponsors at $500 a clip. Is that going to be the same? I don't know, as the Reebok deal. But I just love it, and this is just me talking out loud, guys. I like the individuality. I like the fact that you can have your own shorts. Plus, what if the fighters, and this is highly unlikely, and Dana would probably think I'm crazy, which, I'll admit I am. Hey, no doubt about it. What if fighters don't like the Reebok apparel on their body? What if they don't like the shorts? Fighters are different creatures, guys. Not that they're inhuman, but what if I like tap-out shorts and the way that they feel, and a specific kind of tap-out short that makes me feel that it allows me to kind of get into my rhythm more. Now you're, exposed, and you have to wear Reebok. And yes, it's what has to be done. You will do it. But is that going to make you as comfortable? It's the same thing, guys. I mean, like baseball players, sometimes they decide to put one sock on, and then, they have a ritual. Is this going to mess with fighters' rituals? Probably not, because the cream of the crop always rises to the top. But still, that is something to question. The fabric that Reebok uses, is it going to be the liking to all UFC fighters? Who knows?
And also, Ray, you got to add in the fact that Reebok's lame. So, I mean, no one's wearing Reebok anymore. Okay? That's what you got. No, Reebok's fine, but I'm just saying, I think maybe that's what some people, I hate to say, have an issue with, but let's say this deal yesterday was announced, UFC and Under Armour. Okay? I think a lot of people would be more excited about it. Or UFC and Nike, UFC and Adidas. I think that got people excited, but Reebok has kind of, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Nike own Reebok? They're not like their own company anymore, right? Somebody owns them. Like they're not like their own independent company anymore. I think they're owned by Nike or another conglomerate, but I just think there are other companies that have superseded Reebok and what is cool to wear, and I think that, I don't know if people admit it, but I think a lot of people would be saying, "Oh, if it was a different company." I don't think they would be looking at it as weird as that sounds.
But let's be honest. If you walk into the mall here in my town and you ask anybody, "Hey, do you know what Hayabusa is?" 9 times out of 10 people are gonna be like, "Isn't that a motorcycle?" They don't know that these guys make the fight shorts. The general public. But if you walk into a Dick's Sporting Goods and you see Reebok, and you see those 3 letters that are over your right shoulder, Jim, in red, if you see those 3 little letters, UFC and Reebok, you can put 2 and 2 together. I've heard of UFC. I've heard of Reebok. They're teaming together. Like, I wonder what this is. If you're in Dick's Sporting Goods and they have apparel that you can buy and all of that, it's cool now. I mean, the UFC is cool. So the UFC and Reebok coming together, there must be something. They must both be somewhat cool. I'm going to check out what they have here. And let's not gloss over another fact too. I could care less what these people are wearing. I really could care less. Isn't this the ultimate fighting championship? This isn't the ultimate
fashion championship.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's cool when Vigilante MMA sponsors somebody on Bellator, and you see, on the back of Cody Bollinger or Matt Manzanares, you see our logo on the back of their shorts. Yeah, it's neat, but when that logo's on the shorts, we don't see 50 million people going to our website and reading the articles. It's cool to say, that's my logo, I put it on that guy's shorts, but I'm tuning in to watch the fights. One more point, because I'm about talked out about this. I've been talking about it for 12 hours. But these companies, Jim, you talked about like Hayabusa, Fear the Fighter, Tap Out, all these different companies who make things. Like they make the fight shorts, they make the walkout shirts, and the whole 9 yards. This is 2014, and in the apparel industry, it's gone kind of stale. Oh, hey, Brian Ebersol's fighting. Let's do a walkout shirt. How many times can Headrush do a diamond shirt for Dustin the Diamond Poirier? They've put out 4 different shirts for the last 4 years that all have a different take on a diamond. I get it. Like, that's his nickname. But all of these companies have to evolve with the time. Dustin Poirier is a great guy that works with Headrush, right? You can go talk to him, we'll sign an autograph, we'll come on the podcast, whatever we want. All these companies have said from the beginning, we're all about the fighters. We're all about the fighters. First of all, no, you're not. You're all about getting your brand out there. Second of all, now's the time to prove that you're all about the fighters. You can still sponsor Felice Herrig, Dustin Poirier, any of these people. You just have to be more creative with how you use them. Do you think that Nutramax, that's a supplement company, Alienware, all these people who are on the Felice Herrig bandwagon, the sponsors, do you think that they're going to jump ship with her? No, they're going to find creative ways to advertise with her. She'll be on a calendar, an Alienware calendar. She'll be doing all these different things.
That's what I said.
And I mean, it's if you're Fear the Fighter and any of these other T-shirts, you can still be relevant in the sport. You just have to be creative about stuff. You can't just throw a T-shirt on a guy when he walks to the cage. That's not going to cut it anymore. It can't cut it.
No, that's what I was saying, about being creative. But yeah, if it was Hayabusa, Dave, yeah, people aren't going to get it. But I was talking about other bigger companies and also
but Hayabusa
at the same time.
Hayabusa, if you think when guys are in the cage, they're wearing Hayabusa shorts or tap out shorts. Sometimes Bad Boy and Venom. They're in the cage 9 times out of 10 when you turn it on. But mainstream people don't know who that is.
Right. No. Yeah. But like I said, they were never going to do a deal with that. It was going to be a big deal, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it would have excited people more if it was Under Armour or Nike or another big company, or maybe it wasn't. Again, we're focusing on the fights. That's why we watch the sport, not because they're wearing Under Armour shorts, Reebok shorts, Nike shorts. But yeah, like you said, they're definitely going to have to get more creative for company sponsoring. And Ray, any final thoughts here on the uniform deal?
Right.
Well, here's my only, I think it's terrific that a big entity is working with the UFC apparel-wise. But let's say a guy like Dominic Cruz, who just came back in September, and he's sponsored by whoever, and they give him a check a month. So is this sponsorship deal just for when you fight? Or is this a monthly check that you are going to get? Because my problem, guys, is that if a fighter gets injured for some reason, a couple weeks before the fight, and I have a sponsor, like back when John Jones had Nike as a sponsor, and let's say they gave him a check a month, that money then goes by the wayside,
Right.
is my only thing. It's just when you fight. And guys, when are you valuable to the UFC? When are pro wrestlers valuable to the WWE? When they wrestle, when they perform.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not performing, are you valuable to them? No. I mean, PR-wise, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to compare the two, but I'm just saying that's facts. So, when a fighter isn't fighting, are they getting that monthly check from Reebok? And I know that they came out and said, well, as the fighters get, they start to get their own individual brand, this and that. But let's be honest, guys. Someone like a John Fitch is, who was back in the day top 5 in the world for 3-4 years in the welterweight division, is not going to have his own individual brand.
Right.
Guys that are not exciting fighters, that are just grinders, that just go out there and win, and all they do is gain W's. Is Reebok going to want to sponsor them because they're good fighters, but they don't have much personality? Probably not. So that's my only thing, is that this is Reebok. It's great the fighters are getting paid, but they're getting paid only when they fight. Whereas if I go to Alienware or any other entity, Bob's Bagels, for crying out loud, if I went to Bob's Bagels and said, listen, pay the $100,000, and assuming I fight one time a year, I get a check of $2,000 a month, and they're willing to do that. Now, where's that $2,000 a month? That's just my only thing, guys. I think it's great for mainstream appeal. As Dave said, you go into Dick's Sporting Goods, people know what Reebok is. I mean, I remember, I think I had the old Shaquille O'Neal, black and white with the
Yes.
circles, those Reebok shoes.
The
Dave
pumps.
remembers that. But still, that's just my only thing, guys. I think it's a good deal, but I just don't like how or as of right now, because it's so early in the deal, fighters only get paid during their fight week instead of getting paid monthly. That's my only deal.
Well,
We
yeah, it's definitely going to probably be that, but on the monthly thing, like you said, that could change based on the amount of like personalized T-shirts that they sell. Now, the only thing is, what rank does a fighter have to be to get their own T-shirt? You know, we're going to be talking to Darren Cruikshank hopefully a little bit. You know, he's one of our good friends. You know, at what point would then we get to see a Detroit Superstar T-shirt? You know, then he could be making, like you said, that monthly check. You know what I mean? That's when is that going to kick in? Or, you know, let's say John Fitch, yeah, sure, he was top 10 in the world. He probably would get his own shirt, but who's going to buy it?
That's the thing.
You know?
Is his pay going to be? Are their pay, and more has to come out about it? But is their pay going to be based on the fact that they have their own shirt, or how much they sell? I mean, guys, this is entering WWE territory here. Like, if you look at it, does the WWE have 4 or 5 different T-shirt companies selling fighter or wrestler shirts? No. Who does it? The WWE has their own apparel company. I'm not saying the UFC has their own apparel company, but Reebok now is the sole provider. There is one game in town you can go to, and we're telling you who you got to wear.
Right.
Okay. So my T-shirt stuff is going to be based on how much Reebok pushes me. I don't know, guys. I think it's good because fighters are getting paid, but I am cautiously optimistic is what I would like to say.
Ray and Jim, I know we got to do UFC 181. We got to get rolling on that, but there's one point that we're missing that is a strong point of I don't even know what the right word is, but it freaks me out a little bit. The pay scale from Reebok, you get paid, if you're the champion, you get the lion's share. But then they're basing your pay off of your rankings, 1 through 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 15, and then unranked. So they have these different tiers. The only problem that I have with this, and I'm sure that, Ray, you have an opinion as well, is the fact that the media can determine how much these guys are going to make. If I can get, I'm just looking at the UFC rankings right now, if I have all the access in the world to Donald Cerrone, the number 4 ranked lightweight in the world, and it comes down to me voting, but I always get the scoop from Cerrone, do most media members have the ability to differentiate between those and say, I'm going to give my guy number 4 instead of number 6 when that could take money away from him? You know what I'm saying? Because you're going to have a lot of Midwest guys vote for Midwest guys. You're going to have a lot of East Coast guys vote for East Coast guys, so on and so forth. I think what they need to do, my suggestion is, I think it needs to be Joe Silva and Sean Shelby who do the rankings. That's it. Those 2 people need to do the rankings. That's it.
Well, the UFC probably should do the rankings because at the end of the day, they said they weren't even using the media rankings to determine matchups. But now, all of a sudden, they're using that same media rankings now to determine fighter pay, which to me is probably even a bigger issue than determining matchups or title shots.
I agree.
In this stage of the game. So I think that will have to change, Dave, because like you said, it's not even from a media being biased standpoint. Just some of these people are just put up ridiculous rankings. Like they might not even be biased towards a certain fighter. They may have not even interviewed any of the fighters that they're voting on. But you and I, we just released our rankings for Beyond the Cage on our Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. Check them out. We just released them for December. You and I both go over them. We try to do them, as fair as possible. Again, we're doing world MMA rankings, so we're including fighters that are not in the UFC. But even then, we're pretty fair. Moving guys up, moving guys down. We're not just looking at who's hot, and who's cold. We're looking at a bunch of different things, but yeah, that's going to have to change. Either they're going to have to have I don't think it'd be Joe Silver or Sean Shelby. I would say those two guys have their plates pretty full trying to fill out these cards at the respective weight classes they book, but they're going to have to get, I think, a whole new committee to have maybe like maybe they could still have media rankings, Dave, but the media rankings shouldn't determine the fighter pay. Rankings within the company should. So that way it's not any sort of weird gamble or shamble or some guy didn't even look at the rankings. He just copy and pasted what he had from last week or whatever the case may be.
Right. That's my concern.
Yeah, I agree with you guys, because here's my deal. If you're a media member and you are voting on these rankings, and let's say you cannot get to it's physically impossible to get to every UFC show, and you can't watch every fight because of what you have going on in your everyday life, you may miss a guy who is doing, maybe 1 or 2 in a row on the, Facebook prelims or the UFC Fight Pass prelims. And you're not going to give him a ranking, even though he deserves to be top 15, maybe number 15 or number 14. And you don't know who he is, or some guy blew you off in that respect, and he's 20, but he deserves number 15 or 14 ranking. I don't know, guys. I think this is a bigger issue kind of a deal, which is why I believe that within the UFC, I would like to see a more of a sanctioning body or a group of individuals within the company that are voting for the, who is in the rankings, not some, not media members who, no matter what you do when it comes to combat sports, this is media members, this is cornermen, whatever. We see it time and time again. They can't tell you the difference between a triangle choke and an armbar. So
could it be a thing where we have like college football where we have like a media poll, maybe we have like a fighters poll where the fighters, vote within their own division, and then maybe like a coaches poll or something like that. So that way, I think the fighters poll is the way to go. Each week, I think it should be the fighter in the weight class. They should vote on the weight class they're fighting at. It shouldn't be like we mentioned Darren Cruikshank. Like Darren Cruikshank probably shouldn't be voting on like the heavyweight division. He's not really paying attention to it. Most UFC fighters are not paying attention to their other divisions. They're going to watch. They probably watch the fights, but they're not like, oh, this guy's the number 7. They're not into the minutia of that. They're worried about trading and guys that they're going to fight at their weight class. So after each event, they should get some sort of email that says, hey, rank the 155ers. And for most divisions, you have at least 30 guys. So to me, if all those 30 guys can collectively say, this guy's top 10, this is where I'm at, I think that would go a long way in determining pay. And then, the fighters themselves, that might help matchups and see where they're at, maybe get a clearer picture of where they're at and where others are at for potential matchups as well, which I think is a good thing.
I wouldn't even be opposed to keep the rankings the way that they are, because let's be serious. The number that pops up on the screen, that's not for me and you and Ray. That's for the casual fan to be like, ooh, 6 against 7. This should be a very good fight. I should tune into this. That's what they're there for.
Right, and that's what the media rankings I think will continue to be. But in terms of the fighter pay, shouldn't affect it.
Don't even show it to me. I don't even need to know their rankings for the fighter pay.
I didn't meant show the fighter pay. I meant they're going to show the number, but those should be based off the media rankings. Those rankings of how they're getting paid shouldn't be shown to us. I guess is what I'm saying. However, if they do get a body, whether it's fighter vote, coaches vote, or an independent panel from the UFC.
No, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
The media members will give Edson Barbosa number 4 in the division, right? But he may be number 2 in the division per whatever the group is for his sponsorship money. Keep those numbers to yourself on some computer at Zuffa headquarters. I don't even care. I'm just saying the idiots that they let vote for the media rankings shouldn't affect somebody's pay. That's basically my thought.
Dave's preaching to the choir. I agree.
All right, let's get to UFC 181, not 81. That would have been
81.
a while
I already
ago.
know who's going to win every fight at UFC
That was a while
81.
ago. UFC 181, Las Vegas, Nevada, Mandalay Bay Event Center. 2 title fights on the card for the epic event here in December. The first fight of the evening will be in the lightweight division as former Ultimate Fighter winner Tony Ferguson will take on Abel Trujillo. Looking at the former Tough winner Ferguson, 6-1 in the UFC, currently riding a 3-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Danny Castillo at UFC 177, and 9 of his 16 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Abel Trujillo, 3-1 with no contest in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Jamie Varner at UFC 169, and 5 of his 12 career victories are by knockout. Looking at this fight, I expect a stand-up war. We have more the technical stylings and the long limbs of Tony Ferguson against the brute physical force and power of Abel Trujillo. And for Trujillo, if he can get inside, he definitely can knock out Tony Ferguson. But if Tony Ferguson can keep him on the outside, use his kicks, use his great jab that he has and that footwork and head movement, he could very easily win this fight. And he does have some knockout power too, so he could very easily knock out Trujillo. The X factor will be if Ferguson decides to take this fight to the ground and avoid getting caught with any of those power shots by Trujillo, which so far in his UFC tenure, we haven't really seen him try to take a lot of people down. I don't see that happening, but I wonder, when you get hit a couple times by the bombs of Trujillo, whether that changes his thinking. And obviously, you could conversely say the other way. If Trujillo, he gets, he can't get inside, he gets frustrated, maybe he tries to switch up his normal MO as well. So I think that's the X factor of the fight, but overall, I think it's going to be a stand-up war, and I wouldn't be surprised if either of these two gentlemen knock each other out.
Yeah, this is how you start off pay-per-views. This is a good stylistic matchup. It should be a very entertaining fight, and this is how you kick off the broadcast. Everybody who just threw down let's be real, nobody pays for standard def. If you pay that extra money for that high def, this is how you kick it off. This should be a great fight. I don't think this will be a snooze fest at all, and yeah, I love this. And for me, this is a tough one to pick. Obviously, we'll make picks later, but this is a tough one to pick right here.
This is a terrific fight to start the pay-per-view. This is one where you go to guys that like to stand and trade, put on a show, and you go, all right, guys, you're first up on the pay-per-view. Go out and work. Go out, do your thing, shine. Going back to pro wrestling, guys, it's like this is where you get your guys that can go 20 to 25 minutes. Give me a couple false finishes, and then bring it home around the 20-minute mark. And that's exactly what we're going to see. I'm not saying it's going to go 20 minutes because it absolutely cannot go 20 minutes. Someone's getting put to sleep. I like Tony Ferguson his technical striking. Trujillo's in there and has an opportunity to put Ferguson away, but I think Ferguson is just too smart and a step above Trujillo, but I really do think that either way, someone's going to be put to sleep. But guess who's not going to be put to sleep? Us, the fans, because we're going to be on the edge of our seats.
Hey, Jim, did you see that Vigilante banner almost fall on me?
No.
It almost fell on me while Ray was talking. He was yelling so loud, his voice reverberated off of the wall, and it almost fell on me. Luckily, I was paying attention.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry about that, Juice.
No. Hey, one quick point, too, about Ferguson. Every fight that he's had since his loss to Michael Johnson, every single fight he's looked like a completely different fighter. He's evolved. So, once again, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, it'll be good to see, how he's continued that evolving, since that loss to Michael Johnson.
The next fight of the evening is in the heavyweight division as Anthony Hamilton will take on Todd Duffy. Looking at Hamilton, 1-1 of the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Juan Potts at UFC 177, and 7 of his 13 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Todd Duffy, 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight in his return to the octagon was all the way back at UFC 155, where he beat Phil DeFries. Of his 8 victories, all of them are by knockout. I think Anthony Hamilton in his last fight proved that this guy has some serious top game and some very nasty ground and pound, and I gotta believe that's what his goal in this fight will be, to get it to the ground and try to land a nasty ground and pound against Todd Duffy, because Duffy, very, very heavy-handed individual. He's very fast. He's very athletic, very strong for a heavyweight, but has some very good stand-up, and he's going to be in your face from the start. And if Hamilton can kind of weather that early storm, or he's able to counter and slip and get a takedown, he can very easily win this fight. Duffy does not have a great ground game, but if he cannot survive that early storm or not get this fight to the ground, his stand-up skills are definitely going to be behind Mr. Duffy. But another fight, again, that should be fun, should be exciting. I expect to finish. I don't expect it to go 15 minutes with these two individuals, but it's definitely going to be it's going to be a lot on. Well, Duffy, I think, is going to come out aggressive. He's going to try to end this quickly, but if he can't, or if Hamilton can counter and survive the early storm, he definitely, I would favor him in the later rounds. And if it does go to a decision, I would say it's Anthony Hamilton's fight. But this should be another good one. And two of the younger guys and newer guys in the heavyweight division, and with these two matching up against each other, maybe we get to see some of that new blood start to rise here for the kind of aging heavyweight division.
Ray, I'll let you have the floor on this one first.
Well, thank you, Juice. What I like about Todd Duffy is that he can, when he wants to throw power and he connects, he is extremely exciting. But sometimes he looks at his opposing fighter. I want to see if his striking has evolved. Does he have a jab? Is he starting to get active instead of being real awkward and herky-jerky? Because if he is still awkward and herky-jerky, almost he stands straight up like beef jerky, and that's the only comedy I'm going to give you guys. He needs to be able to be more fluid instead of not be sure of himself. Hamilton's going to take him down at will if Duffy stands right in front of him. Duffy has crazy athleticism, but I want to see more of the refined striking out of Todd Duffy, guys, to be honest with you. And if we see that, I think it could be a long night for Hamilton. But as of right now, I think the smart money is on Hamilton to take him down. And yes, he does have strong top game, but Todd Duffy's a strong guy, very athletic. Maybe to kind of lay in prey for Hamilton. And, we may see a little bit of a grinder of a decision, a 2-3 for Mr. Hamilton.
Here's my thing about Todd Duffy. Todd Duffy lost. He lost all the way back at UFC 114. That's like, my math is terrible. That's like a lot of events ago, right? So he lost to Russo by that knockout. Then I think he lost to Overeem. Like, he's been around, but he's still like young in the sport. But like, there's been quite the layoff for Todd Duffy between his last fight and what was the date on it?
That was at UFC 155 was the fight, which I believe was well over a year ago.
December of 2012.
Okay,
so he's coming off a 2-year layoff. He needs to come out with a sense of urgency, because your window in the UFC is not a very large window at all. The time is right now. He can't afford. If he goes out and loses to Anthony Hamilton, let's be real. There's not a reason for him to stick around, because if he keeps taking these long layoffs, I know they're because of injury and whatnot, but I mean, his last win in the UFC was in August of 2009. I mean, the time is right now for Todd Duffy. This, for Anthony Hamilton, is just another. What's that?
That fight at 155, he won, Dave. That was his last fight in the UFC.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. So he's got 2 victories in the last 5 years in the UFC.
Right, yeah.
So he needs. This is a kind of a re-coming out party for Todd Duffy. It needs to be if he has title aspirations.
The next fight of the evening, also in the heavyweight division, Brendan Schaub against Travis Brown. Looking at Schaub, 6-4 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Andrei Arlovski at UFC 174, and 7 of his 10 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Travis Brown, 7-2-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Fabricio Verdum at UFC on Fox 11, and 12 of his 16 career victories are by knockout. Much like the last matchup at heavyweight, Brown is a amazingly aggressive striker and a very powerful and devastating striker with his punches and his kicks. And can Brandon Schaub counter that? Can he get this fight into his realm, up against the cage, clinch work, being on top, kind of grinding on people? Can he do that against Travis Brown? That's going to be very tough to do. And Schaub has kind of had somewhat of a glass jaw here at heavyweight. He's been knocked out several times by fighters you maybe say would be under him. And now Brown's not under Schaub by any stretch of the imagination, but Brown definitely has serious knockout power. And I know we do picks at the end, but I really am favoring Travis Brown in this matchup. I just find it hard to believe that Schaub can do something to slow down the Hawaiian.
Yeah, Travis Brown's got a lot to prove. Not a lot to prove, but he's got a lot to prove to himself, I guess. The guy that he just lost to is now the interim heavyweight champion. So, Travis Brown knows he's got to come out, he's got to be victorious, and then move on to those top 4, top 5. Maybe the winner of Miocic Dos Santos is somebody for him. But, like you said, Travis Brown's very aggressive. Can Schaub weather that storm? I don't know. Can Schaub, if he can get Brown up against the cage, is that what he wants to do? Look at the last 2 guys that had Travis Brown up against the cage. Travis Brown walks out with the TKO victory. So, another good heavyweight fight, and that's 3 for 3 on this card. That 3 fights to kick it off are all good. So, yeah, I like this one a lot.
Aside from the obvious guys, when a fighter tries to move up the ranks, now with this Reebok deal, especially starting in 2015 in July, there is money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a lot of money on the table. There's a big difference. There might be a big difference between 4-3 and 3-2. So Travis Brown, he understands that he has to go out there and do what he does. Schaub has a sense of urgency. But as you mentioned, Jim, the glass jaw from Brendan Schaub, I honestly foresee Brendan Schaub's going to try to get this fight to the octagon and to the cage. And then we're going to see a vicious, debilitating knee come by way of Travis Brown, and then we'll see Brown standing over Brandon Schaub, hopefully not giving him a punch as Herb Dean swoops in to wave off the contest. Because Travis Brown is a bad, bad man. He's a scary individual. I'm sure he's a kind-hearted man outside the octagon, but once that cage door shuts, he's still one of the most dangerous heavyweights in the world.
That's got to be the greatest prediction that we've ever had on the show. He even talked about the referee coming in so that the down fighter didn't have to take unnecessary punches. That's the most thorough prediction ever, Ray. Strong
Thank you,
words,
Juice.
sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's get to the co-main events of the evening for the UFC Lightweight Championship of the World, as Anthony Pettis will put his title on the line for the first time against former Strikeforce champion Gilbert El Nino Melendez. Looking at Mr. Pettis, the champion, 4-1 in the UFC. His last fight was the win to get himself that lightweight title at UFC 164 by beating Ben Henderson. And of his 17 career victories, 14 finishes with 7 knockouts and 7 submissions. Looking at Melendez, 1-1 in the UFC since moving over from Strikeforce. His last fight was a victory over Diego Sanchez at UFC 166. And of his 22 career victories, 11 are by knockout. I think this is going to be a 5-round fight. I think this is going to be a entertaining fight. Both guys have very excellent stand-up. I would say the difference in the stand-up is the kicks of Anthony Pettis, but I would say Melendez probably has a little better hands than Anthony Pettis, but we're going to see that play out. And to me, the X factor is the takedowns of Melendez. Now, he's not a wrestler by trade, but we have seen him use takedowns, use some wrestling, and you definitely look at his fight when he fought Shinya Aoki. He has a pretty good top game, very good control, and has some pretty good ground and pound. So that to me is the X factor. Anthony Pettis can be a tricky guy to take down. You can ask Ben Henderson that. But if you do take him down, as I mentioned, 7 submissions on his credit for his victories. One of them, maybe one of the biggest submissions ever, submitting Ben Henderson there with the triangle choke. So he's a lot better at submissions than people give him credit for, and I think that is something Melendez will have to watch out for if he decides to take this fight to the ground. But I think we're going to see an epic back-and-forth battle for 25 minutes, and I think it's going to be a close fight, and I think it's going to be the fun fight. And the only thing that I could maybe else add to this is, how are we going to see Anthony Pettis? He hasn't fought since August of last year. He's had a long layoff, also due to injury. Melendez, because of the Ultimate Fighter, he's had a long layoff. He didn't fight since UFC 166, which is a couple months after Pettis won the title. So both these guys have not fought for over a year. I wonder if there's going to be any rust or if there's going to be kind of slow moving. I have a feeling maybe the first couple rounds might be slow, but as it gets into the championship rounds, both guys are accustomed to that. I think it will start off slow but end strong, and it should be a fun fight.
It's all yours.
Want to go with that, Ray?
I tell you what, Jim. I'm just glad that Anthony Pettis is back in the octagon, because I think he is a superstar. He has, the way he conducts himself in public, his fighting style. He's a guy that could break the ceiling to captivate the attention of the general sports fan, not just the fight fan. Gilbert Melendez is an unknown quantity to the general sports fan, but Anthony Pettis can make Gilbert Melendez in this sense. In order for you to really, it's advantageous for a fighter to have a good dance partner. Arturo Gatti had that with Mickey Ward. Tito Ortiz had that with Chuck Liddell and Ken Shamrock. Chuck had it with Randy Couture. We can go on, and I think John Jones is still trying to find that other dance partner. Is Gilbert Melendez that perfect dance partner for Anthony Pettis? Is he the guy that both of them can elevate their game on one night to levels that they didn't think they could achieve? Will it be Saturday night with the cage rest? I don't know. But if these guys put on what we think is going to be the fight of the night, a back and forth, a scintillating affair, whether it be striking and on the ground and just so many different changes in positions, where I think Anthony Pettis will get the edge. Is it going to be close enough to warrant a rematch? Because I think, as you mentioned, Jim, that we will see a little bit of more of a feeling out process because of the lack of activity out of the two fighters, whether it be because of injury and also the Ultimate Fighter. But I'm looking forward to a terrific fight. I look forward to hopefully a better rematch, because if it is close, I think we will truly then see what both fighters are made out of and see them at their highest point, because I think the cage rust will affect them even if it's a round and a half.
Ray, I had an opportunity. One of our friends from Sheerdog, Matt Scaro, sent me a text. He had a chance to interview Pettis about 2 weeks ago, I believe. And, I'm interested to see Pettis from what I heard in the interview. He says that he understands that there's haters out there that, he's a paper champion. He's only fought once.
Dave.
Well, yeah. That's fair. That's fair. There's people who say he needs to defend the belt. He needs to be a little more active. Obviously, because of injury, because of the Ultimate Fighter, he's not in the limelight. But Pettis says that he needs to win this fight over Gilbert Melendez. He needs to get a finish. He needs to get back in there, schedule that next fight, get back in as quick as he can, and keep going on a roll, because he wants to be in that talk that he's the greatest of all time. Well, your last fight was in, what was it, August of 2012? So
August of 2013.
Yeah. So he needs to be a lot more active if you want to be considered the greatest of all time. So I expect Pettis to come out. I don't think it's going to be a total lopsided affair. I completely agree. This is probably fight of the night. But, there's a lot that Pettis has to prove, obviously, as the champion. And somebody coming into a fight as the champion and having a lot to prove, that's definitely going to spell for some fireworks. And, I'm really looking forward to this one.
Let's get to the main event of the evening for the UFC Welterweight Championship of the World, as Robbie Lawler will take on Johnny Hendricks for the second time. Johnny Hendricks, the champion, is coming into this fight with an 11-2 record in the UFC. His last fight was winning the welterweight title against Robbie Lawler at UFC 171, and 8 of his 16 career victories are by knockout. Since losing to Johnny Hendricks earlier this year, Robbie Lawler has gone on to win 2 straight fights, including his most latest against Matt Brown at UFC on Fox 12. Overall in the UFC, his record is 9-4, 5-1 since coming back into the organization from Strikeforce, and of his 24 career victories, 19 are by knockout. Now, gentlemen, since the first time these two met, as I mentioned, Robbie Lawler has gone on to win 2 fights, one of them by finish, the other by 5-round decision. And even in the fight against Hendricks, very close, went 25 minutes, no problem. I think Robbie Lawler is just on a roll right now, even with one of those fights being a loss. I mean, 5-1 in his last 6. You can make a case he should be 6-0 since coming back to the UFC. This guy is an animal. He has figured out how to cut down to 170 correctly, how to still keep that power, how to still keep that pace, add in great, sprawl and brawl tactics. Obviously, Johnny Hendricks beat him once. He can beat him again. But the fact that Hendricks hasn't fought since then, hasn't fought since March, and has kind of been sitting on the sidelines for 9 months while Robbie Lawler has gone and done work to 2 of the best in this division, in Ellenberger and Brown, I think this is Robbie Lawler's fight here in UFC 181. I really think this is him. I think, unless Hendricks knocks him out, I'm not sure if he can beat him a second time. I'm not. If it goes 25 minutes, I favor Robbie Lawler. I just think he's now gotten more accustomed to fighting that 25 minutes, and I'm not sure if Hendricks can derail him. But you mentioned a dance partner earlier, Dave, or Ray. You mentioned kind of can Pettis-Melendez be a great rivalry the UFC can kind of build on, a great matchup. Well, I think win or lose, we're maybe probably going to see a Hendricks Lawler 3, and I think we're going to see a great dance partner, so to speak, between these two, and it's going to really help this welterweight division, especially if GSP doesn't get back, that we can kind of bank on one of these two guys being here, and they're both still very young. I believe Hendricks just turned 30, and I think Lawler's 30 or 31 too, so they still got a couple more years of fighting here and being towards the top. So another great fight, but I think it's Robbie Lawler. And I'm giving away my pick, but I don't care.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what, and Jim, I'm glad, it's surprising to me that Robbie Lawler is only 30 or 31 because he is from the old guard. He is one of the original gangsters when it comes to mixed martial arts. I don't think he necessarily started back when it did, but he's been around for, about a decade? He's been around at least a decade.
He's actually 32, just to clarify. I was close.
Unbelievable. 32 years of age, and this guy has reinvented himself time and time again. And Dave, we talk about this. Just because Robbie Lawler is 32 years of age, in fighting years, I don't think he's 32 years of age. He's more like 46. Because of the wars he's been in, because of the toll that it's taken on his body. It's not like he's fighting amateur bouts with a bunch of headgear on. He's fighting in the biggest and baddest organizations against the toughest and most dangerous opponents for almost a decade. Let that sink in. This guy's had a pro career of 10 years. The average pro football player, his pro career is 3 or 4 years, and that's in a team game. It's got to be less as a pro fighter at this level. And Robbie Lawler has stood the test of time, has reinvented himself, and again, he's saying, listen, you thought you had me gone, but I'm back, and I'm better than ever. Johnny Hendricks may be kicking himself for not taking a fight before that because, as you mentioned, Jim, Robbie Lawler is rolling. He's feeling good. He's in great shape. He has dominated his past two opponents. Will he do that to Johnny Hendricks? Who knows? But there is such a thing as momentum, and Robbie Lawler certainly has that. But a quick way to halt momentum is with the punch, and Johnny Hendricks has that. Sean Shelby, Joe Silva, thank you for the rematch.
Yeah. No, all your points are correct. Just to kind of reiterate, I think that layoff for Hendricks is a bigger deal than people are making it out. And Lawler has gone out and continued to work his craft and become better and better. Ray doesn't get better at being an announcer by sitting at home watching Monday Night Raw and The Ultimate Fighter. He goes out and he does events. He does events at fairgrounds or the MGM, wherever he needs to be, and all he does is perfect his craft so that when he gets the call to do a big show, he's ready to go. And that's what Robbie Lawler's been doing. He's been practicing. I mean, fights aren't practice, but he's been perfecting his craft, and now the call is there. The title shot is upon him. Going 25 minutes isn't going to be a problem for Robbie Lawler, and we could see a belt change hands in just 3 short days. So yeah, definitely a pay-per-view you want to be buying.
Let's get to picks for UFC 181, starting in the lightweight division. Tony Ferguson against Abel Trujillo. Should be a fun fight. I'm really looking forward to this one, but I'm going to go with the reach and the technical striking of the man known as El Kukui and Tony Ferguson.
I am going to take Tony Ferguson as well.
Ferguson across the board, guys.
Hamilton against Duffy in the heavyweight division. I really want to pick Todd Duffy, but I think the layoff, add in the ground and pound of Hamilton, I'm kind of leading towards him. So give me Anthony Hamilton on this one.
I'm gonna take Todd Duffy. I think he's gonna come out. He's got a bunch to prove. I'm gonna take Duffy.
I think Duffy finally puts it together, and I think he goes out there and he finishes Hamilton.
Also at heavyweight, Brendan Schaub against Travis Brown. Like I said, I'm not sure what Schaub can do to really derail Travis Brown. I just don't see it. So give me the Hawaiian there and Travis Brown.
Yep, Hoppa.
Yep, wham bam, thank you, man. Travis Brown starches Brendan Schaub.
Co-main events of the evening for the UFC lightweight title, Anthony Pettis against Gilbert Melendez. Anthony Pettis, that's my pick. I know the layoff is something to be concerned about, but I think he's been pretty healthy here the last couple of months. I think the Ultimate Fighter maybe kind of reinvigorated him a little bit, and seeing the coaching aspect and maybe helped him prepare for the fight. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. I think it did. But give me Anthony Pettis to defend his title for the first time.
Uh-oh, Ray dropped, but I'm going to take Anthony Showtime Pettis for the victory.
All right, hopefully he can come back on. If not, we're close to wrapping up the show. But for the main event, Robbie Lawler against Johnny Hendricks. But before we get to that, Ray, your pick for Pettis and Melendez.
Guys, I honestly believe that it is going to be Anthony Pettis who goes out there and gets the W. I think Anthony Pettis goes out there, looks outstanding. And I think he comes out and he says, it's showtime, gentlemen. It is showtime on Saturday.
Main event, Robbie Lawler, Johnny Hendricks, welterweight title the second time these two fight. Like I said, I kind of gave it away, but Robbie Lawler, that's my pick. Johnny Hendricks again definitely has a chance, but I think this time around it's the former Militich fighter and Robbie Lawler with the win.
Yeah, I think that the extra work that Lawler got is gonna prove pivotal in this fight, and I'm going to take him for the victory.
Yeah, I agree, guys. I think Robbie Lawler, the original gangster, one of the, a guy that was been around the game for a long, long time, finally gets his validation and captures the UFC welterweight championship. I think it's going to be a great moment. I think it's a moment that needs to be discussed and publicized even more. For all the sometimes we ask reporters to really go out there and ask the hard questions. Well, right now, guess what? if Robbie Lawler wins the world title, then it's up to you, it's up to us to talk about how special this is that a guy who has been around the block time and time again finally achieves his goal and his lifelong dream of winning world championship gold.
All right, Ray. Thanks for coming on the show again. We really appreciate it, and hope to have you on again real soon.
Jim, Juice, you guys just continue to bring me holiday cheer with the podcast. I love it every single week. It is certainly something that brings a smile to my face, like how Santa Claus did when he put Christmas trees or Christmas presents under my tree when I was a young lad. Guys, continue the great work. You guys are sensational. Definitely underrated, definitely undervalued, but never underappreciated from Ray Flores and the entire MMA community.
Well, thank you very much, Ray. He is the Juice. Dave Sadler, any final thoughts?
Nope. Ray pretty much summed it up.
All right,
underrated, under promoted, but we're the greatest two guys going, aside from Ray Flores. The greatest 2.5 guys ever.
All right, Ray Flores on Twitter, at RayFlores86. The Juice, at Vigilante Juice on Twitter. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Follow me on Twitter, at Jim Graham. And thanks again for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast, presented by Fight Chicks.